yourself a cold one.
They strike 'em, huh?
And listen to Ross Tucker break down the top college prospects on another tasty edition of The College Draft.
Yeah, it's Daddy Soda time here on the College Draft Podcast presented by DraftKings. The crown is yours. I'm Ross Tucker, former NFL offensive lineman. You know this, 5 teams, 7 years. Absolutely love having a podcast network like this where you can check out all kinds of shows. The Ross Tucker Football Podcast is 3 times a week. Even money for the NFL betting. Fantasy Feast to get you ready for your draft, whether it's best ball or season long. And then the College Draft Podcast, I always talk about it as it's 3 podcasts in one. It's an NFL draft preview podcast, it's a college football podcast, and it's most certainly during the season a college football betting podcast. Love the interaction with you guys that follow us on social media at Ross Tucker Pod. I am at Ross Tucker NFL. And you can always check us out on YouTube, youtube.com/Ross Tucker NFL. YouTube is actually where my co-host first kind of got some traction and made a name for himself. Emory Hunt, Football Game Plan on YouTube. You should definitely check out that channel if you're a football fan for sure. And get his draft guide, footballgameplan.com/2025 draft guide. It's so good for what's going on right now with OTAs and a lot of mini camps coming up this week. And it'll be the best guide you can have for training camp and the preseason. Footballgameplan.com/2025 draft guide. Follow my guy Emory on social media at FBallGamePlan on Twitter. Emory, we got the AFC North today, which is fortuitous timing because the reports coming out of Cleveland thus far have been very favorable as it relates to Shedeur Sanders, his accuracy, his arm strength. You were a guy that you had him number 1 in this draft class for a long time. I mean, going back to Jackson State, you never wavered, even though you're a huge Cam Ward guy. I never even heard of Cam Ward's initial college, University of Incarnate Word, until you told me about Cam Ward. So I know you're a big Cam Ward guy, but you still had Shedeur ahead of him, Emory, and sounds like, we're not there, but from the people that are there, sounds like so far so good when it comes to Shedeur Sanders and OTAs and minicamps. Your thoughts on that?
I'm not surprised, Ross. What's funny about this whole thing is because the reason why he's thriving is what people say they love about the quarterback position, which under this particular draft cycle became a knock. But then when Purdy signed his deal, all you heard was, well, Purdy does all the things well, plays from the pocket, throws on time, gets the ball out with perfect placement and accuracy. Oh, damn, that sounds a lot like Shedeur Sanders. But what I love about this whole thing is people will normally, Ross, will kind of laugh at taking stats during OTAs. But this is unique because this is all he has to, he can't rest on his laurels and wait to training camp because he's not getting reps with the ones, at least, well, at the practices that the media are allowed to be there. So every rep he has to maximize. So he may only throw 9 passes. And yes, 7 of them are complete, but 3 of them were touchdowns. Yes, they may be inside the red zone in 7-on-7, but man, if they were 3 interceptions, we talk about it. So I like that he's taking advantage of this opportunity. And the football part will take care of itself. So I can't wait to see what training camp, the joint practices, and then the subsequent preseason games look like. But he has to perform because this is all he has to really compete with Dillon Gabriel and also the other quarterbacks on the roster.
Let's dive into all the Browns picks, Emory, and we'll start with, they went defense with their first 2. Mason Graham, the D tackle out of Michigan, and Carson Schwessinger, the linebacker from UCLA. We were actually talking about Carson last week when we were talking about his buddy Kane Medrano who got drafted by the Commanders. But your thoughts on Mason Graham and Schlesinger in Cleveland? Mason Graham's interesting because it's rare, I feel like, that you have a guy go 5th overall that there are people with questions about, and also that is not really that physically impressive in terms of the testing numbers. Usually guys going top 5 are athletic marvels.
Especially when you think about the Browns could potentially have had Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders paired up in the pre. You know how many jersey sales would have went platinum? They would have sold so many doggone jerseys, right? But this was the funny knock I heard about Mason Graham during this process while he played next to Kenneth Grant. So, like, what you think? He played at somebody's good, but he also had to be good. He's going to play next to somebody good in the NFL because everybody's good. So, yes, this is a guy that plays really well. He was my number 1 defensive tackle, Ross. So I didn't care about the measurables. I always saw impactful plays coming from Mason Graham consistently. Schlesinger was my number 1 inside linebacker. So when you think about Schlesinger, in terms of how well he plays, again, popped off the film. The first game I saw of him live was against Iowa, and how they had that run game of Iowa in the Cobra clutch. They just really shut them down from start to finish. So not only the Browns grabbed my number 1 quarterback, but my number 1 D tackle and my number 1 inside linebacker. I love what they did so far. And then you get to the next portion of the draft, my number 10 running back and Quinshon Judkins, who, when you think about how they revamped this backfield, they got tougher with Judkins, who showed in the playoffs that, he does have some breakaway speed, even though we saw him rip off a 90-yard run against Marshall earlier in the year. But for somehow they forgot about that and forgot he can really get out and go. So he showed them in the playoff game. I think he got better. He fits the tandem now with him and Dylan Sampson, who has good interior vision, who is my number 15 running back. So I like the fact that they went double down on that position, because you have to kind of revamp. You lose Nick Chubb, and you went with Jerome Ford and those guys, but you want to see those guys do a little bit better in closing out games. Judkins can do just that. Fannin, to me, was a solid one. Is my number 5, number 15 H-back. And the reason why I say 15, the athleticism was a question for me, not the productivity. And he was getting a lot of targets at Bowling Green, justifiably so, because he caught every one of them. And I think he fits perfectly within this Browns offense. We saw him actually, and this kind of gives you a little forecast into what they're thinking probably. He was getting fullback reps at the Senior Bowl. So maybe he's someone that they see kind of more so in the backfield to go along with Njoku out there, and what they're going to do with the run game. So overall, even if you move Shedeur Sanders to the second pick, the first pick in the second round, or second pick in the second round they have, and you look at how they draft, this was a great draft for the Browns. And I know this guy just got injured, but he was my deep sleeper, man, and he signed with the Browns, but he's on IR right now as an undrafted rookie. Jasheem Reed out of the University of San Diego, the Toreros. When I watched his film, Ross, I thought something's wrong with my tape, because either it's in 2 times fast forward, or this dude is the most twitchy, explosive receiver I've ever seen in my life, right? And so he signs with the Browns, and he gets hurt, and now he's on IR. And D'Artagnan Tinsley out of Cincinnati, the guard, big fan of what he does. They got him as an undrafted free agent. And Jason Ivey, I have to tip my cap to their GM, Andrew Berry, because he always finds the spot for an HBCU player. Ivey was the best lineman at the HBCU ranks coming out of North Carolina A&T.
So, question for you about Fannin, because it's interesting. It wasn't last week, it was the week before, when Greg Cosell, who joins me on the Raw Sucker Football podcast, and we go over the rookie skill guys from a scheme fit. He had concerns about Fannin similar to you. He said he felt like he was stiff, and just kind of like when he was running, he just didn't see the fluid movement, and evidently you felt the same way. That's interesting. I'm not saying I'm out on Fannin, but when both you and Greg see something the same way, that speaks to me.
What was weird about the whole thing, Ross, we cover college football during the season, is that all we heard was how athletic Fannin was. And so when you watch him Bowling Green, you're like, he looks stiff to me. Now, granted, we've seen this doesn't make sense that I'm about to say this, but it makes sense that I'm about to say this. There's guys that are stiff athletic. And they're stiff, but they're still super athletic. And for whatever reason, two guys I mentioned play tight end. David Njoku is stiff and athletic at the same time. So is Isaiah Likely, stiff and athletic at the same time. But Fannin doesn't look as fast as Likely and doesn't have the size as Njoku. So I think that's why it looks different as opposed to guys that we've seen be stiff athletic before. And I forgot to mention Dylan Gabriel, who's my number 9 QB. And remember this, Ross, I said this all throughout the draft. People will say it as a knock, but I thought he'd be an outstanding CFL quarterback because of the wide field and how spread open the game is. And just by looking at what we've seen so far during Brown's minicamp and OTAs, he looks smaller than I remember him being. I thought he was more of a thicker build guy that I remember seeing him at the Senior Bowl and also at during Oregon. But either way, I think the way this quarterback situation is set up, the odd man out is going to be Flacco / Pickett. They're going to keep both rookie quarterbacks, and they're just trying to figure out which one will be the starter and which one will be the QB3. But they're going to keep a veteran as the thin line between both of them. And so that's why I think the real battle is between Flacco and Pickett.
It is June, people. You know what that means? It's Labatt Blue Light season. They got that nice lime flavor, too, by the way. And it's buy beer, get gear from Labatt. Go to this website, okay? It's rewards.labattusa.com. Sign up. Just throw your email in there. And then anytime you buy Labatt, which should be a lot, upload your receipt. You'll get incredible merch. Just go to rewards.labattusa.com to see the sweet merch they have because it is awesome. Rewards.labattusa.com. You can hear all about it, but just go check out the merch first. Right, when I would imagine that they'd be able to trade the other one. I think either one of those guys might be a backup upgrade for some team, especially a team that loses a quarterback during preseason, during training camp. The Brown. There's nothing wrong with having an extra guy.
Right.
You can typically do something with them, especially if they've got pelts on the wall like those guys do. Let's get to the Baltimore Ravens. You say this all the time on this show, Emory, and it's almost like a running joke here. But every one of their picks, it's like Malachi Starks was still there at 27, the best safety in the draft, or Mike Green was there at pick 59, maybe the best edge rusher in the draft. We know why he was there with some off-the-field concerns. Emory Jones is interesting because people were talking about him like a top 20 pick before the draft. But let's start with those first couple guys. Starks and Green, as the Ravens once again seemingly get star caliber players at edge rusher and at safety.
The thing with Starks is my number 1 strong safety, and he fits in perfectly like a glove because I think he can also match up versus tight ends and bigger wide receivers and cover. He has good ball skills. He's a good tackler. He's going to start for them. And it just helps them out in the secondary, man. The secondary was a strength. It got even stronger. Now, granted, they lose, Ardarius Washington for the season because of an Achilles, which sucks, man. But thank God you drafted him. And then later you got my number 3 field corner in Robert Longerbeam out of Rutgers, who I was a big fan of. Talked about him a lot. I have an 82 grade on him. So going back to Mike Green was perfect because the Ravens are finally getting back to the type of edge rushers we used to see them draft in the draft. I like Mike Green because he looked like he liked fighting. And when you have somebody like that coming off the edge and just it's almost like he sees the offensive tackle and a quarterback. That's all that's in his field of vision during the play. He doesn't see any other player out there. It's just that and the football. And so he is going to be able to get pressure consistently, help them close out games. Emory Jones, unique because some say he could play tackle, some say he could play guard. There's something there because I think he got off to a greater start than Will Anderson. And then it was kind of like, is Emory Jones better than Will Campbell? And it's like, And then Campbell just kept getting better and shot through the roof and usurped him. So there's something there with Emory Jones. The talent is that you just want to see the consistency. Teddy Buchanan was my number 10 outside linebacker. Very good point of attack player. I thought Cal had a very solid defense. Obviously in the secondary, but linebacker and edge rusher was good, and Buchanan can play. Carson Vincent had one of the best weeks of the Senior Bowl. He maximized that opportunity out of Alabama A&M. He was so good during that week, Ross, that he was singled out after practice as, okay, one-on-one. If the offense wins, the defense has to do push-ups and vice versa. He was winning those reps, so that was a great get by them. And Bilal Kone out of Western Michigan, underrated corner, challenges the ball at the highest point. One of these type of guys that can play in the slot that when you look at it now with the injury of Darius Washington, it's like, wow, that was a really good pickup by the Ravens.
That's a good point. Really good point. What do you think? I'm not asking you about Tyler Loop, the kicker. We don't do that. But I will ask you about LeJontay Wester, the receiver from Colorado, and Aeneas Peebles, the D tackle from Virginia Tech.
Peebles was solid. I have a really good rotational grade on him. But Wester, we talked about him throughout the whole season. He was very underrated as a route runner. He was my number 6 slot guy. I think this is a steal for Baltimore. He is going to prove to be someone that is a great route runner, tough over the middle field, and can help them out in the return game. So that's someone that they really are high on. And Garrett Dellinger of LSU, another solid developmental guard they got deep in the draft, 7th-round pick. Outstanding. Undrafted free agent, I want to give you one, is Marquise Robinson out of Arkansas, was my number 6 boundary corner. And also Xavier Guillory, the receiver, big body guy out of Arizona State, underrated.
We move on to the Cincinnati Bengals, which, I don't know, man. They've got the contract stuff going on with Hendrickson, the contract stuff going on with their first-round pick in Shamar Stewart, the edge rusher for an A&M. Man, Emory, talking with people, there was a wide range of how people saw Shamar Stewart. I mean, some people said this guy is a phenom. He's going to be fantastic with the right coaching. Others said, this guy, he's got all the measurables, but he doesn't put it together. What did you think?
Yeah, he reminded me a lot. The whole process reminded me of Rashawn Gary's process, where tremendous high school recruit, physically looks the part, has all the measurables on paper, but just couldn't finish. He had probably the most about 2 sacks in the country. Like, he was getting there but wasn't closing. And you hope that it closes. He was my number 5 edge rusher in the class. I love the fit for Cincinnati. I just don't understand why they just can't get the contract done. It just doesn't make sense to me. Demetrius Knight out of South Carolina was outstanding on film. He was my number 5 inside backer. I thought they did a good job addressing the offensive line, hopping around here. Dylan Fairchild was my number 12 guard. Jalen Rivers was my number 16 O-tackle with a 77.5 grade. And as an undrafted free agent, Seth McLaughlin, shocked he went undrafted. Again, gas prices, eggs, injury, whatever the case may be. That's why didn't go get drafted. But he's my number 2 center with an 80 grade. So offensive line shouldn't be an issue anymore, I believe, with Cincinnati. But then going back into their draft picks, Barrett Carter, feel like he's been at Clemson for a while. He was my number 9 outside backer. Big fan of him. And Taj Brooks is going to remind some folks of Rudy Johnson and how he, breaks these physical tackles. Just looks like he is physically wearing down the defense as the game goes on out of Texas Tech. I know he's 24, 25 years old, but the guy can run the heck out of the rock. Another undrafted free agent I was a big fan of, Shaquan Loyal. Rutgers football players on defense under Greg Schiano since he got back there. Those are your best, safest bets to make the roster, but also be impactful. He was my number 7 strong safety, and also Rashad Owens, big body receiver, physical guy, possession guy out of Oklahoma State, was my number 9 split in X for us old heads. So big fan of what the Bengals did in the draft.
Let's get to the Pittsburgh Steelers, because I want to make sure we get every team in, and then we can circle back on some things. But The Pittsburgh Steelers, Derek Harmon was their first-round pick, the D tackle out of Oregon.
Now, this is where I had questions. This is where I'm willing to be wrong, because when you look at Derek Harmon, a couple of things you're accounting for: the defense he's playing in, the scheme, what they're asking him to do. But at some point, you want to see that, his skill set kind of rise to the occasion, and just juxtaposed to the Shamar Stewart example, where you saw him get pressure, you saw him at times collapse and just blow up a run play and make the play. But with Harmon, you didn't really see it often. So him as a first-round pick, I had questions about. I wasn't the biggest fan of his selection in round 1, but I hope it works out for Pittsburgh, because that's one of those situations where they draft scheme-specific guys. So Harmon, for me, was the head-scratcher. Caleb Johnson, I mean, come on, Ross. He wears their colors. Like, they needed a guy to be their foundational guy with Jalen Warren. I mean, you go from Najee Harris to, Midwest Najee Harris.
He
right?
looks like Najee Harris.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like, so this is a good fit. Jack Sawyer looks like a Pittsburgh Steeler, Ross, and Sawyer was my number 3, 4-3 defensive end. But I do like how what I loved about Sawyer's game was the timing of when he made key plays. That sounds a lot like TJ Watt. It sounds a lot like every Pittsburgh Steeler edge rusher that turns it up on when you need the biggest play made. So I love that pick. Will Howard wants to be a Steeler, wants to be the guy. I love his attitude, man. He's like, nah, count on me. Don't go get Aaron Rodgers. I want to be the guy. You kind of like that, man. And I like that he also played his best ball in the postseason when it matters the most. Yahya Black out of Iowa. My 13th nose tackle. Depth guy. They needed depth on the interior of the defensive line. And Dante Kent was an underrated player, Ross. I was shocked that not a lot of people were talking about him out of Central Michigan. Very good selection. And Carson Bruner was one of 16 or so former NFL Suns in this draft class. And no surprise he goes to Pittsburgh where his dad played, right? So he was one that I think he's going to be a core special teamer right out of the gate on coverage units and thrive there and work himself in rotation within the regular defense. So the Steelers had a workman's-like effort in the draft. They kind of filled depth spots, and you kind of want to see them address wide receiver, but that's why I like what they did as undrafted guys. They got Rock Taylor out of Memphis, who's a physical player, and also Keyshawn Williams out of Indiana, who I thought was a really solid guy. But Sebastian Castro was the other undrafted free agent I loved out of Iowa. You could ping-pong him around the secondary, and he's going to make plays.
Yeah, he tested really poorly, but I love him as a player. I love Sebastian Castro. That guy gets after you. I think I probably told you about this guy before, Emory, but you'll appreciate this. I got one in terms of the undrafted free agents for the Steelers. Max Hurleman from Wyomissing, Pennsylvania, and then Notre Dame by way of Colgate. The guy started 2 years at Colgate as a running back. Then his last year at Colgate, they moved him to slot receiver. He's the Patriot League Special Teams Player of the Year. Wants to grad transfer, calls me, and he's getting offers from like Richmond and Albany, but he's like, you know what, I just kind of want to see how I can do against the best. Goes to Notre Dame. They put him at corner, and he's ends up being their punt returner and core special teamer. But at the minicamp, those of you that listen or watch youtube.com/Ross Tucker NFL, the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, you saw Max Hurleman talking about the fact that he played 3 different positions as a tryout guy at rookie minicamp. When Mike Tomlin tells you to bring 2 jerseys out to practice the next day, that's a good sign. That's a really good sign that you're doing something right. So he got signed. He's one of the rare tryout guys that actually gets an opportunity. Sounds like things have gone well so far for Max OTA. He's playing more of the slot receiver role. It's funny. Like, honestly, Emory, I look at these guys. So Dante Kent is from Harrisburg here. I saw he and his brother Ronald Kent play in high school. Those kids can fly. They both went to Central Michigan, so I'm excited about Dante. Carson Bruner, his dad was like the prototype as a blocking tight end. Mark Bruner, I mean, he got after people. You did not mess with Mark Bruner as a blocking tight end. What I would tell you about Jack Sawyer, Emory, because there's people that didn't like him that much, he goes in my category of he's going to find a way to find a way.
Yep.
There's certain guys that like he's going to make it and he's going to be part of a rotation and you're going to be happy that he's on your team just because he's that football smart and he'll do it. Maybe he's not as physically impressive as what you're looking for. Make sure you check out Emory on social media at FBall Game Plan, or more importantly, really, Football Game Plan on YouTube, and the draft guide. Still available. You can still get that as an email, sponsor confirmation email if you forward it to me, ross@rosstucker.com. Just go to footballgameplan.com/2025 draft guide. The keg is kicked. We are all tapped out.
Thanks for tuning in to College Draft. Make sure to also check out the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, Even Money, and Fantasy Feast, all on the DraftKings Network, YouTube, or subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform.